the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, episode 81.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.
Welcome to another edition of the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ron Ray. So good to have you. And today we get into something that we've kind of talked about before on the show, but from a different angle. And what I'm referring to is, of course, solar energy at large. But how will solar make itself viable in the market? And Christopher Hopper, who is a Forbes 30 under 30 member, walks us through what they're doing and how that might change the game. And I think that when you sit back and you look at solar, we talked about with David Williams, peer-to-peer trading and stuff like that. It's ideas like this that are going to bring solar, in my opinion, at least more prominence in the marketplace and give it a better positioning to be competitive, which leads to our question of the day. Solar energy. Right now, are you buying or selling on solar energy? Would love to hear your thoughts. Ryan at globalenergymedia.com. That's Ryan at globalenergymedia.com. We've had a lot of discussion about solar, but have not heard from you. Let me know, and we will read your answer on the air. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Christopher Hopper, who is the co-founder and CEO of Aurora Solar. And you can find out more information at their website, which will be linked in the show notes. Well, Christopher, it's always an honor to have on a Forbes 30 under 30 member. How are you doing today?
Very well. How are you, Ryan?
Well, I'm good. As I was telling you before we got on the air, I'm always jealous of the Forbes 30 under 30. I'm 32 now, so it's one of those life achievements that I just will never be able to accomplish. But congratulations to you, obviously. And what got you interested in energy?
Oh, that's a good question. A longer story. I got into energy during my undergrad studies. Actually, I studied electrical engineering. I always really enjoyed engineering, and I enjoyed my studies. But one of the things that frustrated me was that I felt like we're learning a lot of theory, but there wasn't as much opportunity to apply the theory that we learned. At least that's how it felt. Being in school, there's just problem sets and exercises. But I guess I'm a practical person. I like to apply what I learned. So
right.
I tried to find a way to I guess channel that energy, no pun intended. And with a couple of friends of mine in undergrad, we started a charitable organization that focused on developing electrification solutions for off-grid communities in emerging markets. That's a problem that we came across as we're researching different ways of applying our knowledge. We quickly learned that there's more than 1 billion without access to electricity. And that's obviously not electricity to run your Xbox or your big flat screen TV, but not having access to electricity, a lot of downsides. First and foremost, productivity loss, right? People typically live with the sun in those areas, so sun sets at 6 o'clock, and there's no more studying for the kids, no more, basically all life sort of slowly grinds to a halt because you just go with the sun or live with the sun. So what people then do is they use kerosene lamps for lighting, which has a lot of negative side effects. It's a fire hazard. People actually inhale the fumes of it indoors, which is quite toxic. So by providing people access to electricity, you can mitigate those effects. So it has positive health effects and also creates productivity in those communities. So that's why we looked at this problem, and we ended up settling on this idea of centralized battery charging stations that were solar powered, that could then be scaled up and deployed across those type of communities. So that was my first foray into solar and into energy.
You mentioned something there that kind of gets lost sometimes in an energy discussion, is that people who are using wood and they're putting fire, is that they intake a lot of pollutants just by that manner of using that kind of energy. And we kind of, when we talk about energy and pollution and how that affects the world, it seems to be carbon, fossil fuels is the debates around there. But there is a practical, just daily thought process that people who are using older means of technology, if you will, original means almost, that they're suffering from direct pollution because of the effects of the fires.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here, in the West, we think about pollution sort of on the macro scale, like what's the effect on climate change and whatnot. But yeah, in those communities, it has a very direct effect on people's lives and health. These numbers might be a few years old now, but at the time, I read studies that said that there's somewhere between 700 and 800 million people worldwide that inhaled fumes equivalent to more than a pack of cigarettes per day. So that's a significant issue, and that's even putting aside the fire hazard. You kick down the kerosene lamp and your house is ablaze. So there's a lot of issues like that are not immediately apparent, but are still very significant.
Okay, you mentioned batteries, solar batteries, a few minutes ago, and I'm just curious. I hear a lot of debate over how good the solar battery technology is today. I hear some people saying that it's really made a lot of strides, and I hear other people who aren't nearly as optimistic. What is your stance on solar battery technology? Is it obviously it's not where it probably needs to be or where people want it to be, and we're still looking to improve it. But is it a viable solution right now?
Good question. I think the answer is quite complex. So what I mentioned before is a very different market than the one I'm in right now. These batteries were sort of very small scale, a couple of amp hours, just portable batteries for people to provide basic LED lighting at home and phone charging and the like. So the technology was definitely totally applicable for that use case. Now, when we talk about battery storage, sort of here in the U.S. Or even Europe and whatnot, that's a whole different story. Obviously, with the advent of EVs, that's really given a big boost to the market and brought down the cost a lot. Now, as to whether batteries are viable, really depends on the use case. There's many different market segments that have different applications for batteries, coming from transmission and distribution to commercial applications, and then all the way down to the residential applications. On the residential level, it's certainly in the U.S. It's tough to make the economic case for it. You can certainly make a case around energy independence, and you might want to go off grid for other reasons, or just generally because you're not close to a grid, and then the economics look quite differently. But for a mainstream on-the-grid consumer, those economics are challenging. In the commercial sector, however, that's much easier to make that use case, and that mainly has to do with typically demand reduction. So commercial clients get penalized for, spikes for the peak energy consumption or peak power consumption. So anything that can reduce the peak instantaneous power of a commercial customer can have a big economic benefit. So there you'd use the batteries not so much to provide long-term energy, but just whenever there's a spike in consumption to shave that off. So it's called peak shaving, and there the economics can be very attractive. So yeah, and then once you get to the utility level, the economics are again much different and more complicated. So it really depends on which segment you're looking at, and also on the geography. I mean, what I'm saying now is very U.S. Centric, but if you're looking at Europe, especially Germany and Australia, we're getting to a point where batteries for self-consumption can be quite economical. So that's probably going to be a big area of growth is battery plus solar plus storage systems in those markets where you have a big spread between the feed-in tariff that you would get if you have one and the energy cost you pay to the grid. So the bigger that spread is, the more attractive it becomes to install solar plus storage systems.
Okay, well,
no doubt it's a big growth segment and it's
right.
a big part of the future. But yeah, it depends today on which segment and geography you're in.
Right. This is, as I think I understand, maybe your second or third startup that you're a part of, and so you're at Aurora Solar now. So what made you want to start this? It looks like you guys are in the cloud, using cloud-based technology. Kind of give us a 30,000-foot overview of what you guys have going on, and I want to kind of transition from there.
Yeah, actually can tie the two together. My previous experience was, like I said, in emerging markets, and that was my first foray into solar. Out of that came actually two startups. One that I was a part of called BBOXX that now provides commercial electrification solutions for those communities. Because quite quickly we realized that the only way to make an impact was to provide a commercial solution that makes economic sense in itself. But anyway, so then I came to the U.S. Actually for business school, and I had a strong passion for engineering. I was obviously interested in energy. Had sort of that experience in my background that was quite formative for me. And then here I met my co-founder Sam, and we bounced a couple ideas off each other. And then actually he came up with the idea. He said, "Why not build, design, sell, install commercial systems in emerging markets?" Based on my background, he thought, this could be a viable thing. Often, even in non-off-grid communities, and even in bigger cities, you have issues around the reliability of the electricity or the cost of energy, and so forth. So it seemed to make sense to start a business that does the whole A to Z: selling, designing, financing, installing, managing commercial solar installations in emerging markets. So we did a pilot project back in 2012, a 50 kilowatt system for a school back in Nairobi. They were paying, I think, it was close to 30 cents per kilowatt hour by the time you factored in the diesel generator, and they'd have power cuts every other day. And yet they had a lot of sun. So it was a pretty good first project for us to do. And yeah, that's how we set out and installed this system with a big battery bank. And it was a big success. They now save on their bill. They have no more power cuts, and they have obviously a nice flashy solar installation on their roof. And through that process is really how we experience the pain point that we're solving today. It takes a lot of work, a lot of quote unquote figuring out a solar installation. So there's a lot of variables that play into that. What's your location? Like, what's the weather data? What's the weather like in that location? What's the roof structure? How much roof area do you have available? What's the shade profile? Are there any neighboring trees or buildings casting shade on your roof? What is the electricity rates like? If you feed in, like, what's the tariff, the structure of the rate? How much energy consumption do you have today? Do you do a feed-in tariff or net metering? How much energy you offset? How much you're saving on your bill? And how do you finance the system? Is it a cash, a loan, a lease? So there's just many variables, not even going into the whole system design and the electronics of it. So it becomes very tough to figure out a good, let alone an optimal solution for a given project. We solved that in the early days by basically just building this giant Excel spreadsheet that just kind of kept growing and growing in scope. But at some point we realized, well, if we want to do this as a scalable business, we need some sort of software to assist us in the process. And we were surprised to find that the software tools hadn't really kept up with the growth of the industry. We looked around, but we couldn't really find anything that adequately addressed that pain point and adequately let you take an installation from just an address and maybe an electric bill all the way to a finished proposal and all the steps in between. So that's when we slowly started shifting focus. We built a small web application for internal purposes, and as we looked more and more at the market, we realized that to get solar to the scale it needs to be, especially distributed solar to the scale it needs to get to, you need a streamlined software platform that lets you design these systems at scale. Because in the end, it's really a mass customization problem. The process is very similar, but every project looks different, and that's obviously where software shines, is to automate as much as possible and to streamline these processes, the sales and design process, and also give people really quantitative methods to assess what is the best system for a given location, and so forth. So that's long story short. That's what we do today. So we in 2013 we shifted focus, and now we're a pure play software company that makes cloud-based sales and design software for solar companies.
Okay.
So we don't do any installations ourselves anymore. We just we decided to focus on the software piece.
Right. And so if I had a project anywhere in the world, basically what you're saying is that your software could come in and help me figure out exactly how viable the project is, how many solar panels I need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, correct?
Exactly. And many more things.
Right.
Produce engineering documents, a proposal for your customer, let you model different types of electronics, So yes, that's effectively it.
And one quick follow up on this, and I want to ask you something else: is the software for sale as an individual license, or are you guys more operating as a consulting firm who has this software?
No, it's as a subscription. So you can go to our website,
Gotcha.
www.aurorasolar.com, and sign up, and it's a monthly subscription to use the software. Everything runs in the cloud, so you just log in your browser and you have the most up-to-date version. And because it runs in the cloud, we can also do a lot of things that you couldn't do on your desktop computer.
Yeah.
We can run very detailed performance simulations. So we model the system down to every single solar panel, model the way it responds to shade, and so forth, to give really accurate energy production estimates as well. So.
I think that's one of the things that I've seen when you look at the drone industry now is there's a lot of companies that are online, and you upload your drone data there, and then they go and they use their big workhorses to process all the imagery and build the 3D model out, and they send you a link, and you go download it. And it's really a smart way to do things because we all can't have big workhorse computers and servers and all this stuff. Like me, I got a laptop that can do the 3 or 4 things I need to do, but I can't process huge amounts of data because it's not built for that. And so I like where technology is going, where you can send stuff to the cloud, let the cloud do the processing, just to kind of break it down like that, and it sends it back to you. So I love that idea. Now, I have a question here because this is one of the things, and we talked about this on the show before, where I think solar, in my opinion, could really get some legs underneath it if you had the capacity. So like right now, if I could put solar panels on my house and then sell it back to the grid. In the U.S., that doesn't really work very well. You talk to different people around the U.S., there's varying opinions on how much you can get back into the grid and how the power company work. But internationally, in these emerging markets, one of the things I think that there might be some opportunity if you take your school in Kenya and said, okay, how are they going to finance this, A? And then B, well, if they had the capacity to then sell some excess energy back to the grid, then they could generate some revenue as well. Are you seeing ideas like that in the emerging markets where people are going, okay, well, we might need X amount of panels, but if we went ahead and increased our panels, we could sell back to the grid, and we could get our ROI rather would be a lot higher because not only are we saving money, we're going to make money.
That's generally how feed-in tariffs work. I've been working in emerging markets in a little while, so my information might be a bit outdated. In Kenya at the time, it was not possible to feed in because there's a whole regulation side of it,
right.
whether utilities permit you to feed in. There's also the issue in this case that the grid cuts out every other day. At least back then, that's roughly how often it was. And when the grid's down, you can't feed in. So there's that issue as well. So that's why in this case we sized and designed the system primarily for self-consumption, and we installed a battery bank also to provide for the power cuts to make sure there's no interruption in service. But yeah, that can definitely make sense. As why not oversize your system you're installing anyways? But it's mainly a question of regulation and of utilities permitting that and working that out. So there's a complex debate that's happening and that needs to go on to determine what is the right mix of solar. How do you compensate people for solar? There's a debate raging right now in the U.S. About that, and it's important that we go through that process to figure out what's the value that solar provides, and how does that fit into utility rate pricing.
No, absolutely. We had David Williams on the other day. We were talking about this kind of concept, and my stance on it is if you bring people who are on we'll call them the conservationist side, they're wanting to conserve energy, they're wanting to take the stress off the grid, they're wanting to reduce the carbon footprint. Maybe they're wanting to conserve these various things, and you bring in the capitalists look at it and they say, okay, well, you know what? If you're going to charge me more to use energy from this time to this time, but I could actually sell my energy back to the grid from this time to this time. A capitalist can work with a conservationist as long as there's incentives for both. And so I think for so long we've looked at the energy debate, and it's been so divisive, especially if you get in the mainstream. It's so divisive. You have to be on one side or the other. Whereas now I'm encouraged by ideas, companies like yourself, where you can sit back and you start to say, okay, you know what? If you're wanting to conserve energy, you can do that and still have a capitalist mindset. But regulation, as you mentioned, seems to be kind of the biggest thing holding us back. And there's some good reasons for that. Obviously, if we deregulated the U.S. grid tomorrow, we'd have huge problems. So it is a conversation, and we've tried to have that on the show. And it's just it's one of those things where I think actually the emerging markets might be where we learn from the best, because they're going to answer these questions in ways that our grid hasn't even really considered.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. It always helps to look outside the U.S. as well and see what lessons we can learn from other markets, or even looking at Europe and Australia and whatnot. And given the way, like I said, the way rates are there, it might be a precursor to what might happen in the U.S. a couple of years down the line, especially as in light of energy storage, as storage prices come down. But yeah, I definitely agree with your point. I'm obviously a strong believer in solar and the necessity of us getting to a future of powered by clean energy. But I think the only way to really get there is by making it economical. That's why, that's a big motivation of what we do, is to really shave off the sense of the cost per watt of solar, so that by every cent you save off of a system, every couple of dollars you shave off makes the system attractive or economically viable in a new place, right? So that's really what we're all about, is to help the proliferation of solar by streamlining the processes and by saving costs, because that's the only way in the long term we're going to get to a future powered by renewable energy and solar in particular.
Well, I love the discussion. I love the idea of what you guys have going on. I think it's an important discussion, especially as we look at, from a global perspective, the decentralization of the grid. And you have areas that don't have a grid and may never be centralized, if you will. And then, as you mentioned, the discussions in the U.S. about how would we decentralize it? What would that look like? How far can we go? I think there's a lot of meat on that bone to be discussed. And I like what you guys are doing. It's a unique idea, in my opinion, to say, okay, hey, I don't want to be able to I don't want to be able to figure this out. But if, there's a system that I can go, I can get on the cloud, I can process this data. Makes sense to me. Seems like an easy way to do it. And there's so many solutions like that now, where you can go and you can get an expert like yourself to do the heavy lifting, if you will, and then you just go out and collect the data that you need. And so, love the solution. Where can folks find out more about your company and yourself if they want to get more information?
Yeah, we have plenty of information on our website. Again, www.aurora.com. People can sign up for a demo. We do, a couple demos every week, showcasing the product. Email us. We'll answer any questions. Yeah.
Okay, great. And one final thing. I know there's a few big solar conferences coming up. Will you be attending any of those?
Yeah, we'll be at SPI in Vegas. That's coming up in just a couple of weeks.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was just doing an interview.
But every year.
Yeah, I was just recording. This is August 14th from the listener standpoint. We're recording this on. I just recorded Jonathan Morgenstein's interview, and he's going to be there as well. So I was telling him, I'll tell you the same thing. I'm jealous. I need to figure out a way to get to Vegas in September. It sounds like it's the place to be. So
you should stop by our booth.
Oh, well, if I get to get up there, I definitely will. Thank you so much for coming on. We will link to your website and everything else in the show notes so the listeners can find out more about yourself and the company. And we appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. Much appreciated.
The Global Energy Leaders podcast is produced by Michael Sims and Chris Prine. Chris Prine also serves as editor for the Global Energy Leaders podcast. Until next time, keep climbing.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders podcast, powered by R Squared Global.